My family didn't book me a room on our trip. What happened next left them speechless. My name is Alyson Stoner. I'm 30 years old, based in Santa Fe, New Mexico, where I work as a design strategist specializing in high-end hospitality experiences. Most people have never heard of my role, but they've likely stood inside something I've built. I design the invisible parts of luxury resorts, the way the light bends at golden hour, the scent in the air when you check in, the feeling you can't name but want to keep. I started in interior architecture, but found my niche in what we call emotional guest mapping, and over the last 8 years, I've helped create experiences for clients ranging from boutique wellness retreats to billion-dollar desert sanctuaries. It's not glamorous from the outside, but it's deep work and it suits me. I like shaping spaces that make people feel like they belong, maybe because that's something I never felt growing up. I'm the second of 3 kids in a textbook traditional family. My dad, Richard, is a respected surgeon. My mom, Judith, left her marketing career when my older brother was born and never looked back. My brothers Cameron and Chase are everything my parents ever wanted in sons. Cameron, the eldest, is a corporate attorney in Denver with a family of 4 and a corner office. Chase, the youngest, is a former Olympian turned sportswear CEO. Both are married, both have adorable children, and both are by every family dinner metric successful. Me. I was the quiet one who moved away, who does creative stuff with hotels, the one who never brought anyone home for Christmas and always left early to catch a flight. My career didn't have a title they could brag about to their friends, so mostly they didn't talk about it at all. Last December, my mother sent out the annual family group message about our upcoming summer vacation. It's a tradition that began when we were kids, 1 week together at a luxury resort, usually somewhere scenic, always expensive. This year, she wrote they'd chosen a place called Caldera Ridge in western Utah, a high-altitude retreat that had recently been featured in a luxury travel magazine, according to her message. I knew the place well. I had spent nearly 2 years consulting on its launch, from the villa flow to the thermal spring experience. I knew the GM by name, the scent diffuser schedule by heart, and the signature cocktails garnish ratio by muscle memory. My fingerprints were on everything, but my name wasn't. Still, I smiled when I saw the group chat light up with excitement. Leah, my sister-in-law, shared screenshots of spa treatments. Amber, Chase's wife, started a side thread about yoga availability. My parents were thrilled the grandkids would finally get fresh air. Then came the sentence that made me stop cold. My mother wrote, "We've booked 3 villas, 1 for each family. Alyson, let us know if you'll be joining and what you prefer. There may still be some rooms left on the ridge." It took me a second to process. They had booked for themselves, Cameron's family and Chase's, but not for me. Not even a shared bed with the cousins or a fold-out. I was an afterthought, again. I replied carefully, neutral. "Sounds beautiful. I'll check availability on my side." No one followed up. Not even a private message. Not even to ask if I could afford it or if I had time off. Not even to wonder how it might feel being the only one expected to book separately for a family trip. It wasn't the first time this kind of thing had happened. When I graduated magna cum laude, they forgot to come because Chase had an exhibition match. When I was featured in a global design publication, my father changed the subject mid-call to ask about Cameron's new office build. I had spent most of my 20s trying to convince myself their silence was benign neglect, that they just didn't understand what I did, that it wasn't personal. But this was intentional. It was exclusion, with a smile. I sat there for a long time, staring at the thread, the emojis, the flurry of excitement. Then I picked up my phone and called someone I hadn't spoken to in months. Isaac Romero, the general manager of Caldera Ridge, picked up after 2 rings. "Hey stranger," he said. "Let me guess you saw the booking," I exhaled. "I did. I'm not asking for favors. Just give me the villa I like quietly." He paused. "You want to stay as a guest?" "Yes," I said. "Let's keep it clean." I didn't say what I was really thinking, which was, I'm not doing this to prove anything to them. I'm doing this because I'm tired of pretending their absence doesn't hurt. The days that followed that message thread passed in a strange emotional fog. I wasn't heartbroken exactly. I was just tired. Tired of pretending that being left out didn't sting. Tired of explaining what I did for a living. tired of keeping the peace in a family that only ever seemed to hear the voices of its loudest members. I went back to work like nothing happened, reviewed blueprints, joined client calls, answered vendor emails. But in quiet moments while brushing my teeth or waiting for a file to render, my thoughts always drifted back to that group chat, to the casual way they assumed I'd find my own way in. Like I was a guest in their lives. Like I hadn't spent years building things from scratch while they barely noticed. I didn't want revenge. I didn't want a dramatic scene. I just didn't want to hide anymore. If they wanted to vacation in the very place I had helped shape, then they were going to see the full picture whether they were ready or not. I wasn't going to announce anything. No speech, no presentation, no reveal. I'd show up, stay quiet, and let the space speak for me. I had spent years mastering the art of invisibility, of blending into my own work, of letting others take credit because it made them more comfortable. But this time, I was going to be fully present in what I had built. Caldera Ridge wasn't just another project to me. It was the one that had nearly broken me. 2 years earlier, I had signed on as the lead experience architect during one of the worst wildfire seasons on record. Construction delays, supplier drama, last-minute zoning issues. I had been on site for 6 months straight, sleeping in a trailer, working 14-hour days just to keep things moving. I had designed the entire flow from scratch: arrival through the pine corridor, the soft elevation that made each villa feel secluded, the soundscape inside the spa that subtly mirrored the wind patterns outside. Every choice had a reason, and most of them were mine. But my name wasn't anywhere on the guest materials, because that's how it works in our industry. People feel magic. They don't ask who built it. Isaac, the general manager, understood. He had seen what it took to bring the property to life, and though he ran it now with his own quiet confidence, he always made space for my input when I came through. "You want the Ridgeview Villa?" he asked again when we had our final call. "Of course," I replied. "And let's keep my name out of any internal lists. I want to stay completely off the radar." "Even from staff?" he asked gently. "Especially from staff," I said. "Let them treat me like any other guest. If something shifts, I'll let you know." I arrived at Caldera Ridge 3 days before my family was set to check in. The drive up through the mountains was exactly how I remembered designing it: dramatic, slow, and winding, like a slow breath before a reveal. The gates opened silently, and I pulled into the hidden guest lot where a golf cart waited to take me up the ridge. The staff at reception greeted me with warm professionalism, not a flicker of recognition in their eyes. Just how I wanted it. Isaac met me privately later that evening, bringing a bottle of the estate's small-batch Pinot Noir. We sat on the terrace outside my villa, watching the sunset set fire to the peaks. "You okay?" he asked. I nodded. "Just making sure everything feels the way it should." "It does," he said. "It always has. But I hope you know, whatever you decide to do, the team has your back." I didn't answer right away. I just watched the last sliver of light disappear behind the canyon. "I'm not here to prove anything," I finally said. "But if the truth comes out, I'm not going to run from it." The next morning, I walked the entire property from top to bottom, checked the temperature flow in the mineral pools, reviewed the scent alignment in the garden pathways, adjusted the lighting timing in the fire terraces. Everything worked exactly as designed. And yet I felt on edge, as if I was preparing for a test I hadn't studied for, or maybe a confrontation I didn't want. That night, I took out my notebook and wrote a single sentence. Let them see what they never asked about. Then I closed it, placed it under my pillow, and went to sleep without setting an alarm. I watched from the shaded balcony of Villa 10 as the SUV convoy curved slowly into view. 3 large black rentals, just as expected. One for Cameron and his family, one for Chase and his wife, and the lead vehicle likely carrying my parents. I had timed it perfectly. The valet staff would be fully briefed, guest check-in would be seamless, and the welcome drinks chilled exactly to the temperature we'd standardized in the hospitality manual I helped write. From above, everything looked polished and serene. Inside, I felt something else entirely. They emerged in familiar order. My mother, first hair-set sunglasses, perched clipboard in hand despite having no job to do. My father behind her, distracted by his phone, probably replying to a patient's family. Then Cameron, tall and crisp in his usual navy polo Leah, beside him juggling snacks and sunscreen for their 2 children. Chase rolled out of the last SUV in gym shorts, still somehow managing to make it look intentional, with Amber gliding next to him in coordinated activewear. It was exactly the image they always presented: effortless, successful, and entirely unaware of the world beyond their own. I waited until they were fully inside the main lodge before making my way down the winding path that connected the Ridge Villas to the central grounds. No staff acknowledged me as anything but another guest, which was precisely how I wanted it. When I reached the lobby, they were clustered near the oversized fireplace taking photos and admiring the view. My mother turned first. Alyson, she called, her voice bright but flat around the edges like a practiced greeting at a fundraiser. You made it. I nodded and gave a quick hug that barely made contact. My father offered a distracted, "Good to see you," while Chase raised a brow and said, "Didn't think you'd actually come." I smiled lightly. Surprise. Cameron was the only one who seemed genuinely pleased. "You found a place nearby?" he asked. I gave a non-answer. Close enough. I wanted to get in early and settle. My mother frowned briefly. "You're not staying on the ridge. We weren't sure you'd find anything this close. It's peak season." I looked around at the walls I had chosen, the lighting I had calibrated, the scent I had blended. "I managed," I said. "It's a beautiful property." They all nodded in agreement, then launched into a conversation about spa treatments, the kids' nap schedules, and something about a family photo session scheduled for Thursday at sunset. I wasn't mentioned once in the planning. When I asked casually if we were doing individual or group photos, Leah replied without hesitation, "Mostly group shots with the kids. Just a nice keepsake for Mom and Dad's anniversary." My mother added, "It'll be sweet. Matching colors, nothing formal." We booked a local photographer that Cameron's firm recommended. "He's great with children." I nodded, then asked, "Should I bring anything?" There was a moment's pause before Amber answered, "I think we're keeping it to immediate families. But you should definitely come by and watch. It'll be fun." I stood there absorbing the weight of that line. Watch, not join, not pose, just observe, like a well-behaved guest. I excused myself soon after claiming a spa appointment I didn't have. The walk back to my villa was quiet, the wind soft through the pines, the gravel path crunching under my sandals. I had designed this section specifically for late afternoon light, the way it dappled through the branches and curved across the benches along the trail. As I passed each bench, I imagined my family sitting there one day, appreciating the quiet, never realizing I had chosen the angle of every stone. Back inside, I poured a glass of still water and sat on the edge of the soaking tub, letting the silence fill my chest. It wasn't rage I felt. It wasn't even disappointment anymore. It was confirmation. Of how little they saw me. Of how perfectly they'd built a version of family where I was always just outside the frame. I had made peace with that once. I thought I could keep things simple this time, just observe and let it go. But this trip, something was shifting. Their words weren't mean. Their smiles weren't fake, but their choices were sharp. And their silences, those were louder than anything else in the room. On Thursday afternoon, I walked down to the lower meadow well before the sun began to dip. I knew the lighting window by heart, that brief golden stretch when the canyon caught fire and everything turned honey and rust. I had planned it that way, designed the landscape to hold the light longer, to curve the horizon just enough so every photograph taken there would look accidental and cinematic. I followed the trail past the herb gardens, past the curated wildflower beds that bloomed out of season because I'd insisted on soil conditioning, until I reached the overlook where the shoot was scheduled. From a distance, I could already hear them laughing. There they were, all 7 of them dressed in perfectly matched shades of sage green and cream, standing in a loose semicircle that faced the sunset. My mother directed from behind the photographer like it was a campaign shoot. "Chase, angle your shoulders. Cameron, pull Nora closer. Amber, hold Eli higher. Let's make sure the baby's smiling." The photographer, a young man with tired eyes and 2 cameras strapped to his hips, tried his best to follow instructions while also working with the light. I stood just beyond the oak trees, silent, tucked into the shadow line, invisible like I'd trained myself to be. No one noticed me. No one looked around, scanned the area, or even mentioned my name. I waited for a call-out, even a perfunctory Alyson jump in for one, but it never came. I watched as they moved from posed shots to candids, then into that familiar rhythm of captured affection, arms linked hands, held forehead kisses between generations. My mother adjusted everyone's collars and hair, then stepped into the frame with my father. The photographer counted down, then snapped 5 shots in succession. My father laughed between each one cheeks pink from wine or sun. My mother leaned into him like it had always been this easy. I don't know how long I stood there, but I remember the moment I realized what I was feeling wasn't pain. It was distance. Cold, steady, irreversible distance. It didn't matter how much I'd accomplished or how close I was in proximity. To them, I had always been somewhere else. The daughter who worked in hotels, the sibling without a family, the one who showed up out of obligation, not belonging. They had built this image of a perfect family, and there simply hadn't been room for me in it. Not emotionally. Not visually. Not even in the frame. I turned and walked the long way back up the path, avoiding the cart roads, avoiding staff, letting my breath return to something normal. I didn't cry. I didn't shake. I didn't call Isaac or Vivian or anyone who might talk me down. I just walked. I passed guests I didn't know but whose vacations I had shaped. I nodded politely when a couple complimented the garden lighting. I smiled when a child asked if there were owls in the trees. The irony sat heavy in my chest. Strangers saw me more clearly in this place than my family ever had. When I reached my villa, the one they thought I had merely rented, I sat at the edge of the deck and watched the last of the light disappear. From this angle, I could see part of the meadow, a sliver of movement still captured in the frame of my design. I imagined them reviewing the photos later, proud of the composition, proud of their symmetry, unaware of the absence. Or maybe aware, and just unwilling to say it out loud. That thought hurt more than I expected. I didn't eat dinner that night. I poured a glass of cold water, stood barefoot on the cool stone floors I had hand-picked 3 summers ago, and finally asked myself the question I had been avoiding for years. What was I still trying to earn? Their praise, their recognition, their love. And if they gave it, would I even believe it? Or would it always feel conditional, delayed, too little, too late? The silence that answered was enough. I set the glass down, closed the doors, and walked to my desk. I pulled out the guest report files I had brought with me to review casually during my stay. Instead, I opened a fresh page and wrote one sentence in clean black ink: I am done standing outside of frames I helped build. The morning after the photo shoot, the air was unusually dry. I noticed it as soon as I stepped onto the stone terrace outside my villa, the kind of subtle shift you only feel when you've spent months tuning a place to respond to climate. The wind had changed, moving faster through the canyon, stirring the pine needles in restless swirls. I scanned the sky, then the grounds. Everything looked composed, but something in the rhythm of the resort felt off. I couldn't explain it, but I had long learned to trust that feeling. At 10:15, the call came. Isaac's name lit up on my screen, and I answered before the second ring. "We have a situation," he said calmly, but his voice was tight. A pipe burst in the south villas and water reached 2 of the electrical junctions near Villa 3. "That's your brother's unit." I was already pulling on shoes, as he continued. "We've relocated most of the guests on that ridge line, but there's some friction at reception. A high-profile guest's assistant is making noise about refunds and Yelp threats, and your father is, as expected, unhappy." I paused at the door. "You need me to step in?" He hesitated. I wouldn't ask if it wasn't escalating. I understood. I told him I'd be there in 5. As I crossed the lower courtyard, my pulse stayed even, but my mind was calculating every variable. I had designed the water systems with backups. I knew exactly where the pressure valves were and how staff was trained to handle emergency response. The only unknown was how loud my family had become. When I entered the lobby, it was already tense. Guests stood around with concerned expressions. A man in a crisp suit stood at the front desk, gesturing wildly while Jessica tried to calm him. My mother stood a few feet away with her arms crossed and her voice low but sharp. My father hovered by the fireplace, already on the phone, pacing like he was back in a hospital corridor. Cameron and Chase weren't in sight, likely, still with the kids. Jessica spotted me first. Her eyes widened slightly and she gave a small nod toward the man in the suit. I walked past the other guests without pausing, stopped beside her and said, "What seems to be the concern here?" The man turned. Who are you? He demanded, his tone clipped. The assistant GM Jessica opened her mouth, but I held up a hand gently. I'm the one responsible for ensuring your stay is handled with care, I said evenly. I understand your villa was impacted by the pipe issue, and I'm truly sorry for the disruption. He scoffed. Sorry doesn't refund the inconvenience. Do you know who you're dealing with? I nodded once. I do. I also know we've already arranged alternate accommodations with upgraded services, and we're comping tonight's rate. If that's not satisfactory, I'm happy to speak directly with your agency. He opened his mouth, then closed it. Something about the tone or the precision made him pause. Jessica lowered her gaze, hiding a smile. From behind me, I heard my mother's voice. Alyson. I turned slowly. She was staring, as was my father. What exactly is going on? She asked. Why are you here? I could have walked away. Could have let Isaac step in. But I didn't. I met her eyes. Because I'm not just here on vacation, I said. I'm here because this is my project, my property. My father took a step forward. You're saying, you work here? I shook my head. I built this. I led the design, the experience model, the entire guest journey. Caldera Ridge is mine. The silence that followed was as immediate as it was profound. My mother's lips parted slightly, but no sound came out. My father looked around, almost disoriented, as if seeing the resort for the first time. You, he asked. You run all this. Not run. I corrected. I created it. Then handed operations to people I trust. The systems, the flow, the way it makes people feel when they step in. That was me. Jessica stepped aside, quietly giving me space. The man in the suit was already being led away by another staff member. He didn't say a word. I didn't gloat. I didn't explain further. I let the truth sit there solid and undisturbed while they absorbed it. After a long moment, my mother sat down on the lobby bench. I don't understand, she said softly. We thought you did consulting for hotels. I gave a small nod. That's what I let you believe. My father rubbed his temples. Why didn't you tell us? I looked at them both. Would it have changed anything? Neither responded. And for the first time, I didn't need them to. Later that evening, after the situation had settled and the guests were back in their rooms, I returned to my villa. I expected quiet. Instead, I found my father already there, standing in the corner of the main room, hands in his pockets, eyes scanning the walls like they were museum pieces. I didn't ask how he got in. He had a way of letting himself into spaces he wasn't invited into, not out of malice but habit. I walked to the small bar, poured a glass of sparkling water, and waited for him to speak. It took longer than I thought. This place is remarkable, he finally said. Elegant, understated, thoughtful. It doesn't shout. It just holds you. I nodded once. That was the goal. He turned slowly to look at me. I owe you an apology. The words came out stiff, as if foreign in his mouth. Not just for today, for all of it. I didn't say anything. I wanted to hear what he meant by all of it. He sat on the edge of the long bench by the window and exhaled heavily. We've underestimated you. Not just me. Your mother. Your brothers. Everyone. I think we didn't know how to fit you into the narrative we built for this family. I sat across from him, my back straight, my voice calm. You didn't have to fit me in, you just had to see me. He flinched slightly at that, not because it was cruel, but because it was true. We thought you were drifting, he admitted. You never gave us updates, never called with promotions or titles. You always sounded so far away. I almost smiled at that. That's because when I did call you, changed the subject. You asked about Cameron's cases or Chase's contracts. And when I shared something I was proud of, you nodded and moved on. He winced like I had pressed on a bruise he'd forgotten was there. We didn't mean harm, he said, but even he knew how weak that sounded. No, I replied. But you also didn't mean to care. He let the silence sit for a while. What you've built here is extraordinary, Alyson. Not just beautiful but whole. It's the first time I've understood what you actually do. I nodded slowly. It's always been easier for you to understand what the boys do. Their lives make sense on paper. Mine never did. He looked down at his hands clasped tightly. It's not an excuse, just a failing. One I'm not proud of. The door opened gently behind him, and my mother stepped in. She looked smaller than usual, her posture more reserved, as if the grandeur of the space reminded her of how much she didn't know. She didn't speak right away, just sat next to him and folded her hands in her lap. "I thought you were still figuring things out," she said quietly. "That you were searching." I tilted my head. "That's because you never asked. You assumed." Her eyes welled slightly, but she blinked the tears back. "We were wrong, deeply, and I don't know how to fix it." "I'm not asking you to fix it," I said. "I just want honesty. If I was never part of the frame, say that. If I was an inconvenience, say that too. I've made peace with the distance, but don't pretend it wasn't there." She took a deep breath. "We celebrated the children with photos because we could understand them. Their wins were visible. Yours always felt private, complex." I softened slightly. "They weren't complex. You just didn't bother to learn the language." The conversation didn't end with some magical resolution. No hugs, no promises, just acknowledgement, just the truth finally spoken in a room I had designed with truth in mind. My father stood after a while, placed a hand on my shoulder, and said quietly, "Thank you for letting us see it, even when we didn't deserve it." My mother lingered a moment longer, touching the edge of the window trim. "Did you choose this wood?" she asked. I nodded. "Yes. Milled locally. Treated with desert mineral oil. It ages quietly, just gets richer with time." She smiled a little sadly. "Like you." She left without waiting for me to respond, and I let the silence close in behind her. I didn't need applause. I didn't need their validation. But in that moment, I understood something I hadn't before. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can offer people who overlooked you is not anger. It's evidence. Quiet, undeniable proof of who you are left standing with or without them. The next morning, the energy in the resort had shifted in a way only I could feel. It wasn't visible in the polished surfaces or carefully planned breakfast displays, but it lingered in the air like a scent that didn't belong. At first I thought it was just me reading too much into things, but then Cameron found me alone on the terrace near the meditation trail, coffee in hand, eyes squinting against the morning sun. He sat without asking, something he never used to do. For a while we didn't speak. He sipped his drink, glanced at the view, then finally said, "I googled your name last night. Took me 20 minutes to realize you have more features in hospitality publications than I have legal citations." I didn't respond. He continued, "All these years I thought you were avoiding the spotlight because you hadn't made it yet. Turns out you weren't chasing the same light." I let that hang for a moment. Then I said I wasn't avoiding anything. I was building something on my terms. "Quietly doesn't mean unsuccessfully." He nodded. "It's strange realizing your younger sister is more disciplined than you are. You just chose a game we didn't recognize." There wasn't a hint of resentment in his voice, just a kind of quiet respect that I hadn't felt from him in years. "Your resort is stunning, Alyson. Every detail feels like someone thought about how people breathe." That sentence stayed with me long after he left. That afternoon, I was reviewing guest turnover reports in my suite when there was a knock at the door. When I opened it, Chase stood there holding 2 bottled waters and looking like he had run the trail instead of walked it. "Don't ask me why," he said, "but I need to see the service tunnels." I raised an eyebrow. "The tunnels?" He nodded. "Isaac said you designed even the invisible parts. I want to see how deep your obsession goes." It wasn't mockery. There was something curious in his voice. Genuine. So I grabbed my keycard, changed shoes, and led him down the side corridor past the staff access door. Most guests never notice. Inside the tunnels where deliveries move and laundry carts hum like background music, Chase walked with his usual loose gait, but his eyes scanned every surface. He asked about airflow soundproofing tile choice. When we passed the wall where I had installed copper routing behind the plaster to conduct ambient warmth into the floors above, he stopped. "This is the kind of detail people never notice, right?" I nodded. "Exactly. But they feel it." He looked at me for a long time, before saying, "I think I always thought you were hiding from the family because you weren't proud of where you landed. But it's the opposite, isn't it? You've just been too far ahead to bother explaining." I didn't answer. He didn't need me to. Before he left, he touched the smooth stone along the tunnel edge and smiled. "You didn't build a resort. You built a world." And we missed it. It wasn't poetic. It wasn't rehearsed. But it landed exactly where it needed to. That night I joined the full family for dinner on the rooftop deck, something I had skipped for most evenings that week. The air was cool, the sky, deep violet, and for the first time no one interrupted me when I spoke. When a server asked for a wine recommendation, everyone turned to me, and when I explained the local pairing choices, they listened. Even the children sat quietly sensing the difference in how the table moved. Amber leaned over at one point and whispered, "Your staff adores you. You can tell by how they move. I've worked with brands for years and you can't fake that kind of culture." I smiled not for her approval but because it was the first time someone had named what I cared most about. After dessert, my mother reached for her phone and opened the photo folder from the shoot 2 days earlier. "We've decided not to use these," she said, sliding the phone across the table to show me. "They're beautiful, but they don't tell the whole story." I looked at the images. The symmetry, the light, the polished perfection, and the missing space where I should have stood. She continued, "Tomorrow, if you're open to it, we'd like to take new ones here, in your space, with you." I met her eyes. She wasn't performing. She wasn't bargaining. She was simply offering presence. The following afternoon, I stood on the southern overlook just before sunset, dressed in a simple navy blouse and cream pants. No jewelry, no performance. The wind had softened from the day before, brushing across the canyon with the kind of hush that made you feel like time was holding its breath. My mother was already there, arranging chairs and fussing with collars, but this time she didn't seem frantic. There was a stillness in her movements, a quiet intention. Chase was helping the photographer set the frame while Cameron adjusted the stroller to keep the kids from the edge of the platform. No one was telling anyone where to stand. There was no color scheme, no script. Just presence. The photographer, a woman this time, looked to me for guidance. "Where do you want the group?" she asked. I scanned the terrace and pointed to the spot where the shadow line met the light. "There," I said. "That's where the frame holds." My mother looked at me curiously. "Did you plan that?" I nodded. "Years ago. For moments like this." She didn't ask more, she just moved. When everyone was loosely gathered, there was an awkward pause. No one quite knew how to begin. I walked forward slowly and stood in the center. Not because I wanted the spotlight, but because the design only worked from that axis. The others adjusted naturally, shifting around me, settling into a quiet rhythm. Amber stood to my left, resting her hand on Leah's shoulder. My father placed both hands gently on the back of a chair. Cameron and Chase stood on either side, no longer crowding the space but meeting it, and my mother, after a long look at the horizon, came to stand beside me, her fingers brushing mine, not tightly, just enough to say, "I'm here." The photographer lifted her camera. "Ready?" she asked. No one spoke. We just stood together, as the light turned gold, and the canyon opened behind us. She clicked the shutter 3 times. In each shot we weren't smiling. We were steady, present, whole in our own incomplete way. When she lowered the camera, I thanked her softly. She nodded, sensing something had passed between us that wasn't hers to name. As the others began to drift away talking about dinner reservations and bedtime routines, I stayed behind. My mother lingered too, walking with me to the edge of the stone railing. "I was afraid you'd say no," she said quietly. "To the photo. To all of it." I looked out over the view, the exact angle I had once sketched into a notebook during a thunderstorm when I wasn't sure the funding would come through. "I didn't do it for you," I said, not unkindly. "I did it because I no longer need to be invited. I choose where I stand." She didn't cry, she didn't apologize again. She just nodded, eyes fixed on the same horizon I had spent years designing. "You changed the way I see stillness," she said after a while. "I used to think quiet meant empty, but this place feels full even when no one's speaking." I smiled faintly. "Then you're finally hearing it." That evening, over dinner in the greenhouse dining room, the staff surprised me with a candlelit dessert. I hadn't asked for it, hadn't planned it, but I recognized the tray from the special occasions menu we used only when the team wanted to honor someone privately. The chef placed it in front of me with a small bow and a single line written in chocolate across the plate. "To the one who sees what others overlook." My father raised his glass without needing a cue. "To Alyson," he said. For building what none of us saw coming and doing it with more grace than we probably deserved. The table echoed him. The kids clinked juice cups. No one made a toast in return. There was no need. For the first time in years, I felt stillness without weight. No one tried to summarize my journey, no one asked for another story, and no one tried to fold me back into an old version of myself. They simply sat with me in the space I had shaped, letting it hold all of us without question. I wasn't finally seen because I forced it. I was seen because I stopped asking, and started living where I already belonged. The final full day of our trip started quietly. The air was warmer than usual, the kind of early morning heat that hinted at summer tipping toward its peak. I walked the perimeter trail just after sunrise, not for reflection but because the stillness had become habit. It grounded me more than any conversation ever could. When I returned to the main lodge, I saw something unexpected. My father was seated alone at the edge of the courtyard, a worn notepad in his lap, a pen resting between his fingers like he wasn't sure what to write. I had never seen him still before, not once in 30 years. He noticed me before I could slip away, and gestured to the seat beside him. "Do you have a minute?" I sat careful to keep my posture relaxed, not guarded. He didn't look at me when he started speaking. "Last night I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about how many things I assumed about you. How many moments I edited out because they didn't fit the image I had in mind." I didn't respond. I just let him speak. "I used to think I was doing the right thing by pushing you towards something more stable. I didn't understand that what you were building was already far more grounded than anything I ever offered." I looked at the notepad. On it, scribbled in his thin, slanted handwriting, were questions. Real ones. About operations, architecture, flow, service models, even hiring culture. It wasn't curiosity for show. He was trying to learn. Across the lawn, I saw Cameron walking with Nora, pointing out different trees along the edge of the garden. Chase passed by a few minutes later, with a server discussing where to source the ceramic ware in the dining hall. None of them were grand gestures. No one was handing me flowers or speeches. They were simply adjusting themselves to my world, instead of asking me to reshape it around theirs. And it was in those details that I felt something I hadn't known I needed. Not forgiveness. Not an apology. Just proof that they had finally begun to listen with their actions, not just their words. Later that afternoon, Amber stopped by my villa with a small package in hand. "I brought something for you," she said with that soft confidence she always carried, like she had already considered every angle. Inside was a bound booklet professionally printed with photos from the trip. Not just the staged ones, but real moments. Me standing beside the chef laughing mid-sentence. Chase looking at the copper-lined tunnel. Cameron leaning on the terrace railing with the late sun behind him. And in the center, the group photo from the canyon ledge with me at the axis. "We're putting this in the family archive," she said. "Not because of the setting, because it's the first time we got the story right." That evening, during the final dinner service, the staff didn't bring out a surprise dessert or make an announcement. But I noticed something that made me pause. On the corner of each menu in tiny serif type was a line I had never approved. "Experience curated by A. Stoner." I caught Isaac's eye from across the room. He gave a small nod, not for permission, but for recognition. No spotlight, no reveal. Just truth, subtle, permanent, unapologetically placed where it had always belonged. After dinner, my mother asked if I would help her pack. The request surprised me. She had never needed help with anything in her life, but I agreed. In her villa, while folding scarves into perfect thirds, she said quietly, "You don't owe us anything, not even grace,